my mom just started having kids, without understanding repercussions and was on drugs for, you know, all her life basically.
And we're live. Woohoo!
Yeah, and what's Tim, I'm not with you very much anymore, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's like every time I see you, I feel like we're having a party or something, and we have a longtime family friend with us today, Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hi, good morning. I'm happy to be here.
So I'm gonna try my best to introduce Chris. Tim, is there anything you want to say before I do so?
No, only that Chris has a very rare condition known as good audio, bad video thing. So it's manifesting as a circle today. So anybody who has a problem with circles should not watch this. But everybody else can enjoy it.
Chris has a fascinating story, and that's why we brought him on. But I'm going to do my best to introduce Chris. Chris is a longtime family friend. He is my oldest son's best friend, and I first started hearing about Chris when they were in high school many years ago. And next thing I know, my son is telling me that Chris is couch hopping and homeless. And I'm like, what on earth? He's in high school. What's going on? And at the same time, my own son is kind of going through trauma. So I started hearing these backstories. Fast forward all these years, Chris is now working with actually in a homeless shelter with children. He understands the trauma involved. So he's directly working with them as a lead child development specialist. So, with that, Chris, hello, welcome. I want to hear your stories, I want to hear your background. Let's just jump right in and let you start where you want.
Okay, perfect. I'm excited. Of course, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Christelle. I'm looking forward to this. We had some hoops to jump through, but I'm happy we're here. We can make this possible. Um, let's see. So I guess we can just kind of start out a little bit of my background. So my grandmother is an immigrant. I'm technically first generation. I was born here, but my parents are immigrants. My dad as well is an immigrant, and so is my grandmother. So she actually came to San Diego on vegetable trucks, and she had a 1 hour lunch break, and she went and got her little papers, and here we are. She brought her daughters sometime in the future, which is my mom and my aunt and that kind of thing. So um, my mom just started having kids, without understanding repercussions, and was on drugs for you know all her life basically, to this day. So I hope she gets better. But yeah, we grew up with 8 people in the household at some time. My aunt also had children that she would drop off because they lived in Mexico. So she would work in America and come to, go back to TJ at night. So she would drop off my cousins at the house. So you can imagine it was about 11 people at some summers, and I'm the middle child. There's 2 older, 2 younger, and then other siblings that get brought into the story later, but they were stayed with their dads, or, so on and so forth. So my mom had 8 kids total. So 5 I grew up with, and then the other 3 people in the household were cousins, which are now my uncles, if that makes sense, because they were adopted by my grandmother. So
Okay.
yeah, my mom, we were all born addicted to some kind of substance, at some point. And so we were all immediately wards of state. So my grandmother, at the time when she immigrated, she bought a restaurant with a group of her friends. She sold the restaurant, went to all the classes, learned English, everything. Like, she got her GED within 2-3 years to take us in as her foster children. So that's how we ended up in the system, but also with a paternal grandmother.
Okay, Chris, let me get this straight. Because you were all addicted to some sort of substance when you were born,
Hmm.
you immediately went into became a foster child. And
Right.
your
You become a
grandma,
ward of state.
okay, ward of state. And so your grandma was able to get custody of that.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah, basically, it was a very hectic household. We were very poor. Thankfully, we lived in a 3-bedroom house. So it was all the boys in one room, all the girls in one room. My grandmother had her own room. And then my mom would kind of come home and do weird things like rake the living room and like clean up really crazy and then fall asleep for 3 days. And we didn't understand why. Of course, as I got older, I realized, like,
Yeah.
And your
She's on
mom,
drugs.
Chris, your mom currently lives, she's homeless as well, isn't she?
She kind of bounces around
Okay.
um, between siblings' houses, and funny enough, she's actually a elderly caretaker.
Okay.
Yeah, so I always thought that was funny that she works with elderly.
Yeah.
She provides care to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, we're all just kind of growing up in this house. I always said we were hungry on Friday, but we weren't paid till Thursday, and a lot of food insecurities. We always had our basic needs though, and for the most part, you know, it was very hectic. Like I said, there's a bunch of people in the house. So at 16, I'm 16 years old at this point. I have two older siblings, two younger, and the two cousins. My grandma ends up getting hit by a car. I'm like on this LA trip. I went to LA with a friend, and at when you're a ward of state, they contact you regularly to talk to you, and they make sure you have everything you need in the household. And my social worker called me and told me like, "Hey, how you been?" I'm like, "Hey, my sister just called me and said my grandma's got hit by a car and she died." And I'm in LA. I don't believe it. And my sister used to call me pranking me all the time, prank calling and crying, pretending to be my friends. So I'm like, she's messing with me, right? Like, there's no way.
Mm-hmm.
And my social worker was like, "No, it's fine. Don't worry about it." And I get home, and sure enough, she ended up breaking every bone in her body other than like her left index finger, if I'm familiar, if I remember correctly. So that was like really hard for us because at that point we realized, we gotta go our separate ways. Um, so my two older siblings went and got an apartment together. Me and my three younger siblings, or two younger siblings, and two cousins were taken in by my aunt. So my aunt is not a good person. She has her own kids, but at this point, I had already met Trevor. We were in high school. This is where I start hearing about you, Christelle, and everything with him. We had hung out every day at lunch, and we never talked about our home lives ever. Funny enough, we would listen to the same Jimi Hendrix song every day and watch the kids play basketball, and it was all along the Watchtower.
Wow.
Yeah, so we never like spoke about anything.
So this came later. You kind of started sharing your stories later. It wasn't in
Yeah,
actually
because
high school.
so of course I'm very transparent with the high school. I'm like, hey, I have my educational rights. I don't have any parents at this point. I'm a ward of state. I'm emancipated by the state. So it's either I continue to go to high school, but I have to do everything myself. So I lived with my aunt for like maybe 6 months, and she just wasn't a good. I had washed all my clothes by hand and hung them up on the gate one day, and she took them all down and threw it away.
Mm.
Like, man,
Wow.
this is all I own.
While you're
you
in
know?
high school. I mean, while you're in
Yeah,
high school where like the normal story is, kids, I mean, kids are getting cars from their parents. They're, going to sports games and here you are living this life of having to figure out how to take care of yourself.
right, and including my siblings. At the time, I had a girlfriend, and her parents, they really took care of me. I was with her from I was like 13 to 18, so they watched me grow up, and they knew my situation, so they would buy me clothes and they would pay for experiences for me. And to this day, I speak to them. I'm very thankful for them. But he they offered to take in me and my younger sibling, one of my younger siblings, to live with them. I had said no because I had knew she was a cheater. I knew it wasn't gonna last.
Mm,
But he brought me in to work with him at 16. So my aunt wanted me to go to school, and I had my own education, right? So I said I'm gonna go to the alternative like once a week, and I'll work throughout the week. And she didn't like that. She was very opposed to that. We butted heads a lot for that. But I worked on phone lines with my ex's dad. He was a outside project line manager. So I did a little bit of blue collar. That's why I joke now when I wear Carhartts. It's not stolen valor. I earned my Carhartt.
mhm. So, okay, so fast forward to you're living with your aunt, and I know because I know a little bit of your story. At some point, I think if I remember right, she sold the house or something. You end up couch hopping. So, what happened between? And I want to get into where at 18, what happens to foster kids. So let's kind of
Right. Right.
into that and
This
how
is
you
where
ended
this
up
story
graduating.
Right. It's where this story gets really good because it's where all the scandalous stuff starts happening. So my aunt took us to a Disney trip. It was our first time, all of us. As you know, we were very poor. And at Disney, she had us sign papers. But you're 16, you're not rethinking about these things. My older siblings, they didn't care. And basically, she had won money in a lawsuit settlement for it, and none of us saw the money. I didn't even have my cell phone paid or nothing like that. She ends up saying, "Hey, I'm gonna move to Hemet, and it's either you come with us or you stay, but I don't want you to come with us," basically. And she told me that I would never be nothing, and that it was my fault my grandmother died, and a lot of hurtful things. At a 16-year-old, she's like, "If you don't go to school, you're never gonna be nothing, and don't ever talk to me," and so on and so forth. So, yeah, we all signed our rights away unknowingly that she was getting all this money. She ended up buying a house, and she would still work down here and go up once a week to buy like groceries for my siblings. So she still took them. Um, so after that, maybe like after all that happened, when she got rid of the house, I just started staying in people's cars. I stayed with another really close family friend for a while. I kind of bounced around. I stayed with my siblings for a while, and eventually, when I turned 18, and in between that time I'm still working. I'm literally just showering wherever, doing wherever, keeping in contact with my siblings here and there, eating when I can, and still going to school once a week. When you turn 18, what happens is that you are legal for yourself, and you start receiving your beneficial checks. So basically that's what I found out why my aunt took us in. It's because when you're a foster parent, you receive checks, and it's like it goes up with inflation. The last check that I received was 1,100, but when I started receiving them at 21 or 18, they were like $900.
Okay. So your aunt was collecting on that, not and you didn't see any of it, and then
Mm-mm.
you didn't realize this till you turned 18 that you
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
and she also won money, and I guess they had a big nice party at one of the clubs in downtown for her birthday. She got a new Prius. She brought some property. So we're like, wow, she's living good. And realizing at 18, when my social worker is like, "Hey, I haven't spoke to you in 2 months. Where have you been?" I'm like, "Here and there." So she informs me that there's transitional housing opportunities. So there's programs like Walding Family and THP Plus, which is San Diego-based transitional housing for foster youth.
Mm.
So this is when me and Trevor would still talk here and there. And I once they gave me housing, I was able to stop working so much, and I got into a program. This is where I lived in Chula Vista, where you had dropped them off a couple times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So explain that program to me because I remember when you turned 18. I remember when you got your
Mhm.
apartment. Explain the program to me and what happened at that point.
So the program itself, I went through a program. As I think it was with Walding Family was the first one I was with, and it's a nonprofit organization that's obviously funded by the county. And basically, they get when you get your checks, they keep a percentage of that. I think it's only like $100 or $200, and when you graduate the program, it comes back to you. So they'll match the amount. So you still get a portion of your check. It's stipend out, and they give you every first and the 15th. So you manage your money. They teach you money management. They teach you life skills. You get an apartment. You don't pay any bills up until you turn 21. But yeah, the little bit of money that you get is for like your basic necessities, like and you always have a roommate. It's always like two-bedroom apartments. It's somewhere. So your roommates. The first roommate I had, he was an interesting guy. I don't know what was up with him. I was scared to come out the room. I was like, this guy's crazy. Um, but yeah, basically that's how the program works. You literally just say, "Hey, I'm a ward of state," and you show a dependency letter, which is just your letter proving that Uncle Sam's your dad, and that's how you get into the program.
Wow. So at what point did you start working where you are? And tell us about that transition into that.
Right. Okay, that's a. I never wanted to work with kids. That was never my thing. At the time when I turned 18, I was working at a laundromat, and at this point, this is where Trevor starts coming in more. He stayed with me for a couple months. I don't know.
Mm,
He would stay for me with me like at a month at a time, and obviously getting $250 every 2 weeks between me and him. We would share food, and I don't know. It was almost like camping. I always told him, we would hang out and do a bunch of dumb shit, dumb stuff that people do at that age. So that's why I think me and him grew so close because we struggled together, and that's when we
mm,
started talking about our traumas and what we had gone through. And he knew that I was homeless, but he didn't understand the extent of the story or why it happened. You know, so this is when I start hearing a lot about you and your past traumas, and me and him just playing basketball every day. And I'd go to school and come back home, and he'd be like, "Want to play some video games?" That was like our escape. You
yeah.
know, me and him hanging out. But in between this time, he's like, I remember he also lost his housing with your grandpa or your dad. Does that sound
Yeah,
familiar?
Um, at some point, yes. Yeah, that does come into my story. But I think when he was 18, it was his own dad, is what you're talking about. Like
Yeah,
somewhere in between there, yeah, there's a common story. His own dad. We had to move out, and his own dad kicked him out.
yeah,
So
and he was worried about his housing, so we stopped talking.
yeah,
He's like, I'm
okay.
gonna focus on me, and I was like, I need to focus on me too. So through the county, they have programs, and obviously, they really liked how I spoke and the way I presented myself. I would always say I'm not a statistic, that kind of thing. My house was always clean, very different from some of the other kids. I was willing and wanting to go to school. I knew right away at 16 years old that it was sink or swim. At that point, I had maybe nine, high school credits. You need 44 to graduate. I
Mhm.
was a sophomore. My grandma passed, and I had 9 units, which
Wow.
is like freshman units. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
really wasn't doing much. Um, so they were like, "Hey, there's an internship program coming up, and we don't normally, do offer them to our kids, but you seem like a kid with a head on his shoulders, and we'd like to offer it to you." So this was for the county at the public health center in Chula Vista.
Mm,
That's where all the immigrants go and get their immunizations. People who don't have papers, the Medi-Cal, all that's there. And my job there was a general support assistant, and also with the children. And I think that's where I started making those connections with kids. That joke with the parents, they don't know why they come here, but they're coming for immunizations. So they come happy, they hang out with me, and then they get their shots and they're crying and they hate this place.
mm,
you know.
yeah.
So from there, I met my mentor now. I still talk to her. Her name is Paulina Bemerith. She is the managers of San Diego County Nurses. It's a very prestigious title. She wanted me to come back and intern, but she got my foot in the door at another place where it's working with children at a psychiatric ward, and I didn't want to do it. I was like, I don't want to work with kids at all, and I'm 19. I'm like, what the heck? What are you talking about? So literally, 2 or 3 months later, she's like, hey, I got the back. They're gonna take you. You're gonna go and do your classes. You just need to find your way there. So that's where another great family friend, Luis, came in, and he would take me every week, and that's how I ended up at a psychiatric ward at 19, working with foster youth that are in group homes and have similar experiences to mine.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
Wow.
my start working with kids. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Tim, I'm taking over the interview. Do you have questions for him before
well,
before I keep
I was hoping
asking?
to get a word in edgeways at some point, but
Tim, go ahead because I have more.
well, let's rewind slightly back because I'm sure Christelle's will carry the story on. But what was the experience of being homeless like? In because you were sort of couch surfing. Were you ever thinking I'm going to have to sleep on the streets tonight, or did you ever sleep on the streets? I mean, what? How did that feel like? How did you kind of feel that at some point there would be an end to it, or was it just a long, continuous kind of? Um, how did it feel being homeless?
um, have you ever been in a hospital? Really weird correlation, but have you ever been in a hospital for a long stay?
No, I haven't actually.
No. Okay. I've actually had surgery,
Yeah,
and I was in the hospital for almost a month and a half. I didn't know when I was coming out, and it was the worst feeling ever.
yeah,
Like that impending kind of, I'm never leaving this place. Nothing's ever. I'm never gonna get better. Everything sucks. I start reading sad things, get even more sad. But that's basically what it feels like. It feels like a never-ending pit, and
Yeah.
you're digging and clawing your way out. And one good thing happens, and then two bad things happen.
Mm.
Like I was perfect. I could stay at my friend's house for a while, but then his dad gets upset because he leaves at 2 in the morning and
Yeah.
sees me sleeping on the floor, so I have to move, or so on and so forth.
Mm.
It's an uneasy, insecure feeling. You feel like nothing. Imagine at 16 years old,
Yeah.
I already don't have a sense of control in my situation. So having to make some sense of security in myself. And I think I found a lot of that in Trevor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and my friends around me that were honest, talking to me and willing to, see me through this. But that's how it felt.
And we're talking at 16. And you and Trevor went to a different kind of high school. It's not a traditional high school,
Hmm.
it's a charter school. Did you get any kind of support there from teachers or counselors or anything?
I was a very social person at my previous high school,
Mhm.
but I think going into this high school, I didn't talk to anybody.
Okay.
I barely spoke to staff, and I had one friend, but he went to my previous high school.
Okay.
And that's me and Trevor just started talking in a math class. He asked me a question, and I don't even remember what it was,
Yeah.
but that's how we started talking. He said, "You want to hang out at lunch?" I said, "Sure." But I didn't talk to anybody, or other than a teacher there. I don't believe he's there anymore. He was the middle school principal for a while, Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah.
I owe a
Yeah.
lot to him. He would be like, "Hey, if you're not coming in, I'll go pick you up. If
I
you're,
remember that. Yeah, I remember that. A lot of teachers would have students' cell phones and say, "Are you coming to school? This is how it was a little different than most schools. A lot, not all, but a lot of them really truly cared and wanted those kids to come to school. And
Mhm.
one of my sons, also got texted, and "Are you coming to school? What's going on?" Um, so yeah, that's interesting to say. But Chris, it leads me to, like, I don't even know how I want to frame this, but we have students in schools from infant through high school who are dealing with the same kind of stuff that you did.
Right.
Where's the help? Where is the counseling, or how do we become more aware of this in the schools? Like, how, I don't even know how to ask this, because it just seems like adults in the school system should somehow have some sort of resources, or be reaching out, or be doing something. Do you have a comment, answer? I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to ask.
Um, yeah, I think that there is no cure all. There is always going to be some kind of suffering in this world, sadly.
Yeah.
Um, I think that these times, when these hard times, you either make or break you. I think I came out very resilient and
Mhm.
tough and ready for anything. And um, I think the human spirit will endure forever. I don't think there is an answer to what we can do in schools wise, but I think it starts with me. I think every day that I come in and I can be that Mr. Kennedy for one of my children, one of my teenagers, one of my 4 or 5 year olds, if I can be that sense of stability, that sense of hope, that sense of love, care, affection, and everything that I can give to these children, I think I'm doing my part. I think the bigger picture is not for me to decide, but if I come into my classroom every day and do everything possible to make sure this child feels cared for,
Mm.
feels loved, feels everything that they need to feel, and a sense of security and comfort in my classroom, I think I'm doing my part.
So
Yeah.
You
let's
know?
talk about this then, Chris, because now you're working at, we have two shelters that I'm aware of, quite well known here in San Diego, and you're at Father Joe's.
Hmm.
Um, Tell us about this. Tell us about this experience, and what is Father Joe's Village? What is Father Joe's? Who was Father Joe?
Right. Well, Father Joe's is a nonprofit. It used to be called St. Vincent de Paul or St. Vinny's
That's
for all the
right.
locals.
Yeah, that's right. What about that?
So Father Joe was a pastor who they call him the hustler. He would talk you out of money. He would. So he started off just by donating and making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and he noticed people without shoes or blankets. So then he got somebody to donate shoes. He got somebody to donate blankets. And then John Kroc came along, which is Ronald McDonald's wife, and she's a big time philanthropist.
That is so
So she
crazy. I
built
know.
the church. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And she built the first shelter, and then it became a big thing and a bigger thing, and one thing led to another. And even now, they're building housing. 50% of it is like rent controlled or a part of our program in some way, and the other half is general population. So they're big. It's a really big organization. They offer everything: showers, 3 meals a day, and if I'm not mistaken, they're the only actual licensed homeless shelter on the Western Seaboard that has that title, homeless shelter, because it
Interesting.
can it can
Okay.
be transitional or
Yeah.
day center, but to
Okay.
have that license is different. Yeah.
Okay. So now you ended up working there, and what specifically are you doing now with children, and how does your experience help with what you're doing?
So right now, currently, I just got a promotion in October. Very happy. I worked very hard for it. A little bit of imposter syndrome. Summer just ended. I just did a 10-week summer program where the issue was always retention in children and children served. Previous teachers, no offense to any of my teachers, just the retention for children wasn't there.
Yeah.
So I designed a curriculum, very social and challenging curriculum for my children, very stimulating. Most of my curriculum is based around social interaction,
Mm,
teams, environments, that kind of thing. So that 10-week program literally just ended on Friday. And at Father Joe's, we do camps. So throughout the summer, one week we'll take different age groups of camps. So the first week was, 5 to 7 years old. And every single day they have a field trip. One day they'll go to the movies. One day they'll go to the Santee Lakes. One day they'll go to the park and have a big picnic. One day they'll go to jump around. And the last day is always a big one, like SeaWorld, Disneyland, Knott's.
mm.
Hmm.
Wow. So I don't know if you knew, I worked in the other homeless shelter. And the stories I heard was quite, I don't think people realize how much energy it takes to be homeless.
Hmm.
And the stories that I often heard was, kids would come to our preschool over at the other shelter, and by night they might be riding the bus because they don't have anywhere to go. Their parents would stay on the bus all day
Hmm.
because at least they had shelter until they could get into the shelter for the one night overnight stay and get fed. And so, I mean, who comes to your preschool and your child center there?
Right. I am in the school age classroom at the moment, but you see all walks of life. When the Ukrainian war started, we had a lot of Russian and Ukrainian immigrants. Right
Mm,
now, of course, we see a big influx in Venezuelan immigrants. I have, I know somebody who used to be a mailman. I know somebody who used to be a banker. These
yeah,
are just normal people who are down on their luck and don't have support systems. Some
yeah.
people get bused from Arizona or other places that have forecasts are inhabitable to humans. So they bus them over to San Diego where there's resources, perfect weather to be homeless, and
Mm,
you know,
yeah. We're talking about, man, there's all this stuff on the news, and there's all this stereotypes of what it means to be homeless, and they shouldn't live on the street. And I think part of the problem is people aren't willing down to listen to stories and humanize other people because the stories are profound. And once we start listening to the stories, we realize, at any given moment, any one of us can be homeless.
Hmm.
I would talk to these people who had been, at one time on Wall Street, and then mental health caught up to them, or lawyers, or like you're saying, the stories are profound. And I just wish people would sit down and listen to stories and realize we're all more alike than different. Um, can you expand on that, Chris? Kind of your experience with that. Not, I mean, we've heard your story, but just how do we humanize each other?
exactly how you're saying, giving people the time of day, the platform to express themselves. You have to understand that, we talk about basic necessities being food, water, housing, but we're social creatures by nature. A
Hmm.
lot of our primal instincts are to be together. That's why you feel guilt. That's why you feel, embarrassment. It's because you want people to like you. So relationships are often overseen as being a basic necessity, but that's the most important thing to people who are in these shelters. You don't have much of anything. Your relationships are your most important factor in your life. Who your friends are, who you take care of, who do you congregate with. And I think by how, like you said, giving people the time of day to listen to these stories, humanizing them, and helping them, I think that will, kind of drive a little bit of more success. I know when I was, homeless, and like I said, when I spoke with Trevor, that made me feel a lot better. I know even to this day, that's my brother,
Yeah.
and our relationship is strong, and I care about him, and I talk to him every day, or when we can. He's busy now, but relationships are so important to human life, and that's so overlooked all the time when we talk about basic necessities.
We have a huge homeless crisis happening in California, but because we live in San Diego, I think we can speak on it more. Um, we're driving out homeless camps. What now? Where are unhoused people going? Like what do we do about this, Chris?
I don't have all the answers for this, but I will tell you that the amount of people that you see on the street is only what, maybe 50, 60%. The other 70% of people that are homeless are actually living in cars,
Mm,
living with siblings, family members, the people that you don't see. That's the biggest population of homeless people. The people on the street are people who have mental health issues, who, did some drug and never came back, and, or lost their family, don't have no support, poor, whatever the case may be. The people on the streets, I feel like more times than not, are people who love that lifestyle. I've spoken to a lot of people who are like, no, I'd rather be here.
mm,
I've met a couple nomads in
yeah.
PB. I don't know if you've been out there, OB. They'll tell you, nah, I'm not going anywhere. I'm living on the beach.
I have, and it's funny because I know some professors who prefer the nomad lifestyle as well, and they prefer to live on the streets. So, again, stereotypes, right? There's stories out there that people aren't aware of.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's no answer. I just every time I hear that, one of our politicians are cleaning up the streets, I'm like, where are these people going? There's nowhere else to go when you
The
are.
underpasses,
Yeah,
tunnels. You could get
exactly.
inside those big underpasses. There's holes and people get in there. Like all the Acme cones and stuff are in the bridges. They'll live
Mm.
in
Mm.
there.
Yeah. Tim, I'm gonna let you jump in here because again, I'm once again
Well, this
taking.
is the trouble with like you not having somebody to see the facial expressions of or whatever. Um, I had in mind this one question, which is similar to Christelle's one. But what advice, if somebody was watching this who was in almost exactly the situation you were at 16,
Yeah.
what advice would you give them? Because there must be things that it sounds like when you got to 18, you found there was a whole load of stuff that you probably could have done, but you just didn't know about it. I mean, this is the big problem, I think, with a lot of government regulations. There's lots of stuff that people just don't know. So, what advice would you have given to somebody in exactly the same position you were at 16, apart from find Trevor or something along those lines?
Right. Well, at 16, if you have no parents and you are an orphan, go to your local precinct and tell them you are an orphan, you have no parents.
Yeah,
They'll streamline you straight into the system. You'll be placed with an adoption or with a foster parent for 2 years. When you turn 18, you can enter other programs that will help you, and like
yeah,
transitional housing, and you'll receive a check until you're 21. You get Medi-Cal until you're 31. There's so many benefits. This past semester, I just aged out of the program, but I've been in school for 3 years, and they'll pay me 2,500 just to be in school because
yeah,
I'm foster youth or former foster youth. So there's so many resources for foster youth or orphans out there that aren't being tapped into or people are unaware of. As for being homeless with a family, I think that's a different situation. I think, don't get into any drugs, stay clear of anything,
yeah,
just kind of put your head down and go to school, focus on the things that matter and all the positive things in your life. And that can be hard sometimes. It can be very hard. And especially, being homeless and being on the street, you don't know what can happen, or, so just try to focus on the things that are important to you. I knew right away that school was going to be my out. I knew that I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want to be on the street. I didn't want this to be forever.
yeah,
So I came up with a plan about how I can do that and where I'm gonna kind of meet my basic needs where I can, and that's how it happened.
Okay.
I
And
want to ask a final question, Chris. What now? What now? What now for you? What now for um, where are you going? What
I
now?
was I was just telling my friend yesterday, I have a imposter syndrome. I had never thought in my life that I would be taking care of children. And, starting Monday or
mm,
tomorrow, I'm going to have to pick these kids up in a company vehicle and take them to school and do an after school program. And I had never thought of myself to being at the head or having a whole program designed around me. It's such a weird feeling, to be put in a situation like that. Um, I'm obsessed. I think obsession beats talent every time. Not only am I a talented teacher, I'm obsessed. I worry and I care for these children, and sometimes it gets me in trouble. I'm not gonna lie. A little fraternization sometimes, it's very serious. Like, oh, you didn't like that? Here you go. So, I think just kind of going with the flow, and every day I strive to be a better teacher, a better person, a better mentor. I want to be these people for the children, and I want to be in a classroom for as long as I can, and
Mm,
as long as my body allows me to, and then hopefully move up into something more serious where I can have a bigger effect that isn't just at the forefront with the
yeah.
kids. I want to be able to be in a position where I can manage a program and see how I can better make that. I think that really scratches, that brain itch and really fills my cup is to revamp things and you know get in there and just see what I can do or bring new life to something.
So we normally ask at the very end of our show where people can get a hold of you, but we typically interview people with these big old websites. So what I want to ask you, Chris, is if someone finds themselves in a similar situation as you, are you okay with them reaching out to you on Instagram? Can
Yeah,
we on your Instagram? Um,
yeah.
what
And
is your Instagram?
yeah, that's
My Instagram has a very funny name. It's Himifer, so it's Christopher just with him in front of it. So him, OPHER_, and it's very private because I work with teenagers that love
Yeah.
to find my Instagram, and that's a big no no in this community. In this,
Oh, for sure.
you know,
Woo. Mine are not allowed on my social media, but
yeah,
people who are 18 or above who want to reach out to Chris and have questions about the system, or maybe they know someone in a similar situation and just have some
yeah.
questions because there's so much to try to navigate. Um, it'll be, well, I think Tim will probably put it up somewhere. Where are you going to put it up, Tim?
Well, this is all being recorded, so I can just,
Yeah.
if I remember, and if I don't, well, Christelle can criticise me, and I can change it later. So,
What was that?
yeah,
Put it up
yeah,
so we can get in touch with Chris. Chris, we're gonna end the show because we could go on forever, and we have a million things we could talk about, and
all right,
maybe even bring you on and talk about the trauma part because we bring on a lot of people to talk about trauma, so people don't know they are not alone in their journey. So maybe
yeah.
we'll talk to you about that at some point. But
yeah,
other
open
than
to
that,
whatever.
yeah, thank you for coming on. This was amazing to hear your story.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
coming
thank you
on,
for having
Chris,
me.
and thanks for anybody watching in the future who's watched this.
This is what God requires.
I started to fall in love even more with him. And my second decision was, do I invite him or do I just go on my own, which was what I planned for. And in the end, I did decide to ask him hey, if I invite you, will you come? And he
Mm.
said, absolutely. I will quit my job and I will join you on this round the world trip.